Hi everyone, my name is Pam, and this YouTube video is meant to document an illness that I believe I experienced as the result of a Paragard copper IUD. This video has been a long time coming. I wanted to make it months ago, but I still wasn't really feeling well. But anyway, I'm a lot more back to myself now, and I have a nice new Google Pixel phone, and it seems to be taking a pretty good, clear video, so I'm just gonna roll with it. My hopes in making this video was just to simply document what happened to me for my own, just for posterity, and to talk about my symptoms, how I got them under control, how I ultimately found out that it was my Paragard IUD that caused my illness, and hopefully save somebody's life who's also dealing with bizarre symptoms or illness as a result of an IUD. So I'm going to jump right in. I got sick in 2017. It came on very acutely. Literally, I know the exact date, and if I'm glancing over here, it's because I'm glancing at my laptop, which has a timeline with all of my notes and health stuff. Which I'm going to reference during this video. But it was literally the morning of September 27th, 2017. And I woke up with just this severe agitation in my head. Actually, this is what I'm going to do. First, I wanted to list out all the symptoms I had, just to kind of give a laundry list of symptoms. Then I'm going to jump into kind of the story and what happened when I woke up on September 27th. And then I'm going to talk about now and what I'm experiencing now, and a little bit about a lawsuit that I want to start getting in the works here. So I'm going to give the symptoms list first. This will make it easy. If you think that if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, then it might be worthwhile for you to keep watching the video. If you're not, then maybe you can move on to something else. I know that when you're sick and you're searching the internet for answers, you don't want to waste a lot of time. So. Okay, the main symptoms that I had experienced were extreme agitation in my head. Now, when I say agitation, I don't mean a mental or emotional agitation. I mean a physical agitation. It was kind of like in the front of my head, and then it kind of like spread through my whole like face, head, and body until my entire body was agitated. Almost like I felt like I was poisoned. Almost like I was itching inside my body, like my whole nervous system was inflamed. I can't really describe this. This is not a symptom that you can check on a doctor's checklist of symptoms. That it's not like a thing that I've ever experienced before, and I don't think I will ever experience it again. But it was an agitation throughout my whole body that felt like I'd been poisoned. I've never been poisoned before, so I really don't have any frame of reference to describe what it feels like to be poisoned, but that's how I felt. My entire body, head to toe, was in pain. The second major symptom that I had was hyperacusis. Hyperacusis is a severely painful inflammation in your ears. I believe it's it's kind of like an inflammation of the auditory nerve. It's not my actual ear here, but I have to be careful not to shake the table. I'm shaking the camera. Anyway, really severe. I never did go to an ear specialist, but it was extremely painful to the point where the sound was painful. The sound of taking a cereal bowl out of the kitchen cabinet and setting it on the countertop was excruciatingly painful. I cannot describe the pain of having this. I hope that I never have it again. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So I had this agitation in my head and my whole body, and this hyperacusis. Some of the other symptoms that I had, and I'll talk more later in the video about in more detail about all of it and describe it, but I also had nausea. It was more of a difficulty eating. I don't know, kind of like when you have the flu, when you just don't want to eat. Like I was having difficulty eating. I wasn't vomiting, but I had nausea and just a difficult time with food generally. I eventually developed tremors, like a subtle kind of tremor throughout my whole body. I would walk down the steps, and as I would take a step, my whole body would shake like this. Very strange. That happened about a couple weeks into everything. And then I also had like head tics. So like kind of like this, like my head would like rock to the right. And I think that it was a result of like the severe agitation that was happening in my head. It just kind of like expressed itself by causing tremors and tics. I don't know how to, I've never experienced that before. I don't know. It's kind of like somebody with Parkinson's or whatever, where your head is just ticking. I had sensitivity to light and sensitivity to sound. Obviously the sensitivity to like TV, like I couldn't watch TV. Looking at a computer monitor was painful. It was almost like if I shook my head, it hurt. I couldn't look at moving pictures. I would get dizzy. So like videos and TV and computers. What else? Yeah. I had a couple episodes I had like severe fatigue, to the point where I was laying in bed, and I don't know if this had to do with the fact that I wasn't eating very well or what, but I was literally laying in bed with my mouth hanging open and just super fatigued. Like I was frightened. I've never been that fatigued before. I had some episodes of difficulty breathing. I can't really describe it. It just felt like my chest was tight. I wouldn't just say it was quite the same as having anxiety. It was like having anxiety, but there was just a couple days where I noticed specifically difficulty breathing. I grew gray hair, which I'd never had before, and I'm not really genetically predisposed to having gray hair at 32, so that was weird. Then I had severe anxiety, which I'll talk more about later. Severe anxiety, racing thoughts, repetitive thoughts, and later on I had just other random symptoms, but like I would get like light waves of nerve pain in my hands and feet. That was something that kind of came on later after all these other symptoms. But yeah, I had maybe 15 different symptoms going on throughout this whole thing. And they weren't all at the same time, but as I go through my timeline of things, go into them in a little more detail. Anywho, so that's part one of the video, is just the list of symptoms. If that sounds like something you've experienced, it might be worthwhile to keep watching. This video might be kind of long, but it's just really something I need to do for myself. I need to talk through what happened, and I need to kind of record everything that happened for posterity and for my own peace of mind, because talking about it helps me deal with it and to get over it. So I woke up that morning on September 27th with this severe agitation in my head. And I called into work immediately, and then I was sitting in my bed, and then I just, I don't know, I was overwhelmed. It was like sensory overload. I can't really describe it. My head hit the pillow, and I just slept for like another 6 hours. And I woke up 6 hours later, and I really didn't feel any better. I just felt very strange. I had this agitation in my head, and it just like wasn't going away. And I remember I thought maybe it was some kind of weird migraine that I was experiencing. I never had a migraine before, but I was like, well, I don't know, I'm just sick or something, or maybe it's some kind of anxiety. I don't know. And then I kind of wish I had this written down more detail, but the second day I woke up with this again. And the agitation was so severe. This was like the physical agitation that I was talking about, like in the front of my head. I sat up in bed and was like, oh my God, like if this continues, if this if this like sensation were to continue for even more than a few more days, I will take my life. Like, it was intense. It was really severe. I remember my boyfriend was there in the room with me, and he started talking to me, and I was like, stop, don't talk to me. Like, I can't, like, just the sound was like, started overwhelming my brain. It was really strange. I was trying to like, just make things be quiet. Very weird. I was like, maybe this is some anxiety thing. I don't know. I called into work and I went to the doctor's office, I think the same day, and I was kind of shaking and crying in the office, and I was like, something feels really wrong. Something's wrong. I don't know if I'm having anxiety. My head, there's an agitation in my head. I don't know what it is. So I think I kind of like put that suggestion into the doctor's head that it was anxiety. She was just so this was just a regular GP that I called out of the phone book on Google, who was just close to me. She wasn't a specialist. She wasn't an internist or anything, just, regular doctor. I went in there without even knowing me at all, and me just saying that, like, I'm having this weird head agitation. It might be anxiety, I don't know. She ran a few tests, but she just insisted that she gave me anxiety medication, which was Xanax, which I was kind of fine with because I had taken it many years earlier in my early 20s when I had a couple panic attacks, and I knew I didn't have any bad reactions to it. So I was like, fine, you can give me some Xanax. And then she checked my thyroid, blood sugar, vitamin B, magnesium. It's like some basic things just to make sure it wasn't, I don't know, whatever they test for when you're having anxiety, like a heart issue or some general blood sugar issue. She just kind of ran some standard tests, but she went ahead and gave me the Xanax. And she also told me that I should take an antidepressant. The first time I'm going to see her, she wanted me to be on Lexapro. And I was like, well, I'm not depressed, and I really am not comfortable taking antidepressants. I'd rather not do that today. So I think I left with my Xanax prescription and was really hoping she would call me with some results from these tests. But let's see. What was the order of this happening? There was a dance event that was happening that weekend, and I took a little bit of the Xanax, but it didn't do that much for the head pain that I was feeling. And it was getting worse over the weekend that I was at this dance event. And I really didn't know what to make of it. I thought it was some kind of weird migraine. And Saturday afternoon, I remember it got so bad, I left the hotel and I went home to lay down. I was like, I don't think I can get through this event. I was feeling very strange and very dizzy. So I went home and I took a whole Xanax, which I've never done before, and I laid down for like 30 minutes. And then what was crazy was after I laid down for 30 minutes and took it, all of the agitation went away, like all of the head agitation. And I sat up in bed and I was like, wow, like I feel really great. That must have worked. Maybe it was some kind of weird anxiety thing. So I actually got up and put my shoes back on. I went back to the hotel and kind of went on with everything. But then so the Xanax worked really well that one time, but then after that it didn't really work so well anymore. And my symptoms kind of progressed and got worse and worse and worse. But I did go back to the doctor and tell her that the Xanax had helped. She was really, really sure that it was an anxiety thing. But within a few days, I had developed that ear inflammation that I was talking about, the hyperacusis, where sound became extremely painful and I started to not be able to eat, and my whole body started to hurt. And it was just, I was scared to take too much Xanax because I don't like to take that kind of stuff. So I was like taking tiny little bits of it, which probably wasn't enough. But I just knew that it was an anxiety that I was experiencing. And these symptoms kind of kept coming on. I was sitting in the chair just trying to watch TV, but unable to watch TV because of the pain of looking at the moving pictures. It was almost like, it was like I was on some kind of sensory overload. Like my brain hurt, like my brain was on fire. And I was really, really scared. And I might have gone into work for a couple days, but I could barely make it through the day because looking at the monitor was really painful. And I ended up going on disability because I didn't have any PTO left. So I think I filed for I went back to the doctor. I told her I still wasn't feeling well. I was like, something really, really doesn't feel right. I'm having these other weird symptoms. My ears, blah, blah, blah. And she insisted it was anxiety. She wrote me permission to take disability from work. So I got a doctor's note and request for disability. And I was on disability for 4 weeks, which is crazy. Like, that's how severe my symptoms were getting. I couldn't do anything. It got to the point where it hurt to walk. It hurt to drive. I could just barely function at all. So I had all these symptoms that I mentioned earlier. I started getting really fatigued. I had pain inside my flesh. My ears were in excruciating pain. I was going around the house wearing earplugs. It was very, very bizarre. Couldn't look at the TV. Couldn't do anything on my computer. My skin hurt to touch. I felt extremely fatigued. Literally all I could do was sit in my chair all day long in silence because the inflammation in my ears was so bad. I've never experienced pain like this before. And I was Googling everything. It's a really rare thing to have. It's not like tinnitus. Tinnitus is like a ringing in your ears. A hyperacusis is like pain from sound. I was Googling everything I could imagine because the doctor, when I would go to her and tell her, like, this is still bothering me, she wrote it off every time as anxiety. And I was like, I don't think this is anxiety. I think the third time that I went to her, I accepted the Lexapro prescription that she gave me. She wanted me to take Lexapro, which is an antidepressant, serotonin reuptake inhibitor, SSRI, whatever. And I was like, well, this is really weird. I'm going to just try it. Maybe it'll help. So, I just have a lot of anger over this because I did not need an antidepressant. I never should have tried it. This is a side story. I took this Lexapro, okay? This is unrelated to the IUD. The Lexapro that she gave me caused a really bad reaction. I took half of the smallest milligrams of Lexapro that you can take. She told me to like work my way up to the regular dose. And I was like, fine, I'm not so scared to do that. That's fine. But the first night that I took it, I had a crazy depressive episode. Like, I've never had depression before. I don't think I've ever had depression before. Or maybe I don't know what depression is. But literally it felt like a Dementor from Harry Potter came and sucked my soul out of my body, and I was filled with sadness. It was the most terrifying, bizarre, crazy experience I've ever freaking had. It lasted for like 30 minutes to an hour. And the second night I was on Lexapro, the same thing happened. I remember being in the shower and I was like filled with sadness and terror and like emptiness and wanting to die. And it just kind of washed over me for about an hour. And then it kind of subsided. I think I went to bed and I was okay. But then day 3, I took it and I went to bed that night and I was laying in bed and I couldn't fall asleep. And I kept like throwing the covers off of me, almost like a hot flash. I was like, and I was like, and I kept like, almost like I was going to hyperventilate, but I didn't. And I felt crazed. And I got so scared, and like after a couple hours of this, I got out of the bed and I was crying. And then I did have an actual anxiety attack because I was like freaking out, and I wanted to go to the ER. So I thought something was very, 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 very wrong. My boyfriend at the time convinced me not to go to the ER and calmed me down. And after a few hours, it passed. But I mean, I was up till 4 or 5 in the morning with what I later found out was called a manic episode. So there's depressive episodes, and there's manic episodes. So Lexapro literally made me depressed day 1, depressed day 2, and manic day 3. It was the most terrifying thing ever happened to me. And I developed tinnitus in my ears as a result of it. I already had hyperacusis going on, the inflammation in my ears. Tinnitus was a ringing in my ears, except it was the worst ringing in my ears I've ever had in my entire life. It literally felt like it sounded like a train, like a rusty train going along tracks and just scraping like nails on a chalkboard. So this symptom started as a result of the Lexapro and piled on top of the other symptoms and the hyperacusis in my ears, and I was in extreme pain. Like I wanted to die. I would not wish tinnitus or hyperacusis on my worst enemy. I really hope that if you're watching this, if you have hyperacusis and you're watching this video, that what I'm going to tell you is going to help you. Because there's very little on the internet about it. And I was looking for YouTube videos with somebody talking about having hyperacusis, and I couldn't find anybody. So these symptoms were really, really severe for the month of October. So it started end of September, severe symptoms going on the month of October. I was on disability in October. My mom came to visit at the end of the month to take care of me for a week because I could like barely feed myself and couldn't drive and do anything. And while she was here, we were sitting and talking. And I remember it was like we were outside, and I was like looking at my arm, and I was watching my arm shake. And I was just looking at it like, what is this? Like, what is happening? Why? I was trying to analyze it, like, objectively or something. I was like, I think my mom said, she was like, maybe you're having an allergic reaction to something, just like a really bizarre allergic reaction. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'm having that's possible. I mean, it's Atlanta. Maybe their allergies are really bad here. I've never had allergies in my life, but maybe I'm having some weird allergy to something. So the next day I went to CVS and I bought Claritin. I was like, it's just allergy medication. Can't really hurt me that bad if I don't have allergies, whatever. And I took Claritin that night. It was 24-hour Claritin. And then I took it every day for 6 days. And by the 6th day, my symptoms were drastically reduced. And I could not believe it. And I was like, oh my God, I must be having some kind of like allergic or inflammatory reaction to something in my environment. But I did not know what it could be. I mean, oh my gosh, everything. I was terrified. I was, I threw out my lip gloss. I got rid of my pillow and got a new pillow. I cleaned the house top to bottom. I was so paranoid. I did not know what could be making me so sick, like so allergic that I'm having neurological symptoms. What else did I do? I tried to go gluten-free for a week. I was like, maybe it's a food thing. Maybe it's a food allergy. I cleaned my bathroom, bleached it top to bottom. I thought maybe I had a mold allergy. And I noticed that in my tub, underneath my rubber mat, there was like black mold and mildew. And I was like, oh crap. Like maybe I was taking a shower and like these mold spores were coming up and like getting into my nose and like getting in my head, because I guess that can happen. You can get really sick from mold. And that was kind of my going theory for a while. I was like, well, I must have just been exposed to something really toxic. But now I went back to work in November. I was able to go back to work in November taking Claritin. Actually, I had to take the Claritin twice a day. It's a 24-hour pill, but I needed it twice a day. And I know that it was the Claritin was helping me. The inflammation in my ears went down. The head agitation went down. I still had all of the symptoms. They were just lessened from what they were. And I asked my GP, I asked if I could double dose on the Claritin, and she said, yeah, that was fine. So I'm double dosing on Claritin all the way through like December. But I was still having symptoms, and I was still, I didn't have a diagnosis. I didn't understand what was causing it, which was very frustrating. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I went to a naturopath, which I decided ultimately not to go with them because it was a little too Scientology for me. Like, I went in there and I had to hold on to these like metal things, and they were like, oh, we're sending the frequency of these different agitators through your body and to see what what could be making you sick or whatever. It was just kind of weird. Like, I believe that they believe that it worked, and they wanted to just like give me detox supplements, which is fine. But I was like, this isn't really good enough for me. I want to know what's actually wrong. I want to know why I'm so sick. Because in November, as my physical symptoms started to decrease after I took the Claritin, my mental symptoms started to increase. It was like my symptoms morphed or changed. And that's when the anxiety started getting really, really bad. I didn't know if I was having like PTSD or something from all the physical pain I was in October or what, but it was like the symptoms kind of swapped from physical to mental. I had severe anxiety, racing thoughts, repetitive thoughts, disturbing images, by painful thoughts. So what I mean by painful is I would think of something and literally like something painful happening to me, like being cut or whatever. And then I could feel that, I could like feel it. And I mean, I would have the thought and it would repeat itself like 50, 100, 150 times to the point where I would be holding myself like in pain. It was very bizarre. I've never experienced this before in my life. It just added to the whole terror of the whole experience of not knowing what was wrong. So I'm dealing with this anxiety and these crazy, painful, racing thoughts through the month of November. They did start to decrease. I kept on keeping on with the Claritin. I think there was a lot of inflammation in my body. I got sick over Thanksgiving weekend. I was sick with the flu or something. On top of all this, I got a flu. And then in December, I got a flu again. I got a flu and a bacterial infection that lasted for 4 weeks. I've never been sick that long in my entire life. I usually get a couple sore throats every year. I have never been that sick. I just felt I had been through so much in October and November, and December just really broke me. It was like my immune system couldn't handle anything. But anyway, let's see. I was working. I was able to function at work in November and December, but I left my job in December to take a better one that was going to start in January. And so I had some time off in December, thank God. So while I was sick with this whole flu and bacterial infection, I didn't have to go to work because I had like a 3-week period. And I that was really great because my symptoms were lessening and lessening. And I was hoping that I would be feeling a lot better by the time my new job started in January. And by the time my job started in January, I was feeling better. I also wanted to mention I had been tested for Lyme disease because you can get hyperacusis with Lyme disease, but I didn't have Lyme. I tested negative, and I had my adrenals tested too, which was something I had requested because my doctor didn't want to run any tests at all I had a CT scan. Sorry, looking at my notes here. I had a CT scan, which came back clear. I was spending a lot of money at the doctor. I went to see some psychoneuroimmunologist who, when I described my symptoms to him, thought that I might have something called mast cell activation syndrome. And then he put me on a bunch of like neurological and brain support supplements, but that was it. He was like, well, there's no cure for that. It's something you'd have for your entire life, and people with mast cell, they have to take antihistamines their whole life. And I was like, I kind of succumbed to that. I was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to take Claritin every day for the rest of my life. I don't think that's good for me, but maybe that's what I have to do. Maybe I just have some severe allergy, and my brain is releasing these histamines, blah, 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 blah. And that's kind of what I was going with for a while. And I had a suspicion maybe I had some toxic mold poisoning or something. Then I started my new job in January, and I was getting through the day. I still had, sound was painful, basically. And I still had head agitation every day. The tremors had gone away by then. The head tics would be there once in a while, but they had mostly dissipated by then. Then I went to see, I was still adamant that I found out what was going on with me, because I didn't want to be on Claritin every day for the rest of my life. And I found a functional medicine specialist in Marietta. I forget her name. If I think of it, I'll tell you. Holtdorf Medical Group, HOLTDORF Medical Group. They are like legit. They will test you for everything under the sun. If you come in there with a mystery disease, they see people with all sorts of crazy, unusual stuff going on. So I think I made an appointment there I could not get in to see her till April because she's very booked up. Dr. Bullington, Bullington. So I got into Dr. Bullington in early April, and she did a massive blood workup on me. Massive. Unfortunately, she didn't test me for heavy metals. They do test for heavy metals there. And I kind of wanted her to, because I had this sneaky suspicion that I was being poisoned by something, but that the Claritin was just kind of covering it up, and I wanted to really get to the root cause of it. But she tested me for a bunch of other stuff. She retested me for Lyme disease. She tested me for parasites. Oh my gosh, everything under the sun. They took like 15 vials of blood from me. And then, so that was April. She told me at the time that she had had 2 other patients with hyperacusis, like I had. One of them had Lyme disease, and one of them had toxic mold poisoning. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I bet it's mold. I was exposed to mold somewhere. That's got to be what it is, because I tested negative for Lyme. So that's the theory I was going with for several months, actually. Then I had a follow-up with Dr. Bullington. Yes, I had a follow-up with her. She only came up with a couple things. She said that, so I was negative for Lyme. I don't have my test results in front of me because I misplaced them, which makes making this video very frustrating. But anyway, yeah, negative for Lyme. Most of my other numbers looked good. My thyroid was one of my thyroids, like T3, was a little low. What do you call it? Yeast. She was saying I had yeast overgrowth, so she wanted to put me on antifungals, like yeast in my gut. I was like, okay. I don't know if that's related to like what I had going on or not, but it was interesting. The most interesting result of the blood work was an inflammatory marker. Now, the GP that I saw earlier, she had run an inflammatory marker test, but she said it was normal. This inflammatory marker was called C4A, and it was off the charts high. So she was like, well, you have this inflammatory marker, it's really high, but the test doesn't tell us why it's high. It's just that it's high, which means there's inflammation in your body, but we don't know where the inflammation is. So we don't know where or why there's inflammation. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So she started treating me for, candida, whatever. So she starts treating me for candida and puts me on some other supplements for adrenal fatigue and stuff like that. Because I was fatigued a lot and stressed out a lot from all of this. So I started taking her supplements. I started taking, I think, a thyroid. I started taking the antifungals for the candida. And then like a couple weeks later, I had my yearly pap smear at my gynecologist. So this was in May. And I just decided while I was there, I would have her take out my IUD just to rule it out. So I had asked every single doctor I saw whether I should have my copper IUD taken out just to rule it out. I asked every doctor that I saw if they thought that would be a good idea, and none of them thought it would be a good idea. They didn't think that it could do anything. That they didn't think it could make you sick. Even the functional medicine specialist who sees people with all sorts of crazy stuff, who was very, very thorough. Her office visits, I got an hour of time with her each time, which was great. I was never rushed out of the office. She was very intelligent, but even she didn't suggest that I take my copper IUD out. So I, on my own volition, went to my gyno for my yearly and had her take it out. Literally within 48 hours of having my IUD taken out, my symptoms, the remaining symptoms that I had, dissipated. That night I went to bed and I remember I sweat. I had a hot flash or whatever. I sweat and I soaked my bed sheets. It was weird. And then like 24 hours later, the last bit of like head agitation and ear inflammation that I had was gone. So at that point, I was like, I know it. I know it. I know it. I know it was the copper IUD that was causing my weirdo, bizarro symptoms. The whole time from September through May that I was sick was the freaking IUD. I know it. And I went back for my follow-up with a second follow-up with the functional medicine specialist, Dr. Bullington. And I had more blood work done. I had come in, the phlebotomist did more blood work a couple weeks prior, but that blood work was taken after I had the IUD out. So when we got those results, and I sat down with Dr. Bullington and we went through everything, we saw that the inflammatory marker had gone way down. It was like, I don't know, on a scale of 0 to 800, it was at like 5,000. And then when I went back for my follow-up, it had come down to 2,000. So the inflammation in my body was still elevated, but it was much improved. And I was like, that makes perfect sense because I feel so much better. I wasn't like perfectly 100% back to myself. But it was so much improved. I went back to that GP that I saw at the beginning and I had told her about it. But yeah, I was so angry. The gyno that I saw when I was in Atlanta, she was a young girl. I don't think she was super experienced. I wanted to call her back after and tell her that I should tell her that I improved so much after taking it out. Because I had mentioned to her when I was in there that I'd been sick with some really bizarre illness and I didn't know what it was, and she was like concerned, but there was nothing she could do about that. It wasn't really her area. Anyway, I did call my gynecologist that originally put it in back in 2015. So what's crazy is that I had actually had this IUD in for 2 years before my symptoms started. So my symptoms started acutely September 27th, 2017, but I had the IUD put in 2015. And I think what happened was just that inflammation had built up in my body over time. It wasn't something that happened like the day after I got the IUD put in or whatever, but you put copper in your body for that long, eventually your body's going to try to reject it. And that's essentially what my body was doing. It was like freaking out, trying to get me to get this poisonous thing out of my body, and I wasn't taking it out. And the Claritin, the antihistamines, like really helped with my body's, the reaction my body was having, but it wasn't curing, it wasn't fixing the issue. The underlying issue was still there, which I knew it was. And when I got my IUD out, it all resolved. How do I know it was the IUD and not something else? I mean, my symptoms have gone away and they have never come back. So I don't care what any doctor tells me. I know it was the copper IUD that made me so sick. And I told my gynecologist, as I called the gynecologist that had inserted it in 2015, I just dropped the word lawsuit. And the actual gynecologist, who I'd never actually seen when I went in there, I only ever saw the nurse practitioner, the actual gynecologist who owns it called me personally. And she was like, oh, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm okay now, but I just wanted to tell you what happened to me in case other women come into your office and, they are reporting these same kind of symptoms. So I explained to her the agitation, the hyperacusis, and the tremors, and the pain, and the sensitivity to light and sound and movement and everything, and how I'd been on disability and all this stuff. Anyway, I feel like my story is jumping around a lot, but basically she just kind of acted like I was some weird, rare case that she'd never heard before. She was like, well, people can be, there's people who live out in the woods because they're allergic to everything. And, some people are just, their body's just whatever. They're like, it was like she totally acted like no one's ever had an issue and she's never heard of this in her entire life, which to me is insane because I've been on the internet a lot. Not that the internet is my doctor or anything, but there's multiple groups on Facebook and websites with women talking about how sick they've gotten on their IUD. I mean, there's already lawsuits in the work for Mirena, which is a hormonal, but this is not I don't think it's that rare. I really don't. I think she was brushing me off. I didn't have a single doctor, and I probably saw 7 doctors over the course of several months. None of them acknowledged it. No one has any education on it. I don't think that many human long-term studies have been done on the copper and what kind of reaction it can cause. The only symptoms I was told you could get from a copper IUD was it was painful to get it put in, and you could get worse cramping. Because you have a thing sticking in your uterus. Of course, your uterus cramps more to try to expel it or whatever. But I didn't actually have ever any pain in my uterus or anything down there the whole time. So that's part of the other reason why I suspected the IUD, but I didn't directly connect it, because not only was I not having any pain in that region, but my symptoms started 2 years after getting it put in. So even I was like, I don't want to jump the gun and just assume it's the IUD. That would be really unusual. But it turns out that was in fact the case, because I got the IUD out and was totally cured from everything. So, yeah, I just wanted to share this with you guys because, I had to be my own advocate the whole time that I was sick. I was either told I just had anxiety and the doctors dismissed me, or, even when I found out what it was and I told the doctors, they didn't believe me. I'm hearing the same story from a lot of women online. I think a lot of people, when they go to the doctor, are dismissed as having anxiety or stress when they actually have something more going on. I mean, I had severe anxiety at the beginning anyway. I mean, it did fade over time, but I was just so scared not knowing what was happening to me. I think anybody would be. But it's just I was afraid I was going to take my own life. I mean, it got real bad. especially in October when I was having all the really painful physical symptoms. Like, it was really, really bad. In November, it was really bad when I had all the mental symptoms. And it just really kind of dragged on. And even after I got it out, it took me a while to feel better. I think that the inflammation levels in my body were still high, as shown on that test that Dr. Bullington did for me. And it was just, it's been more difficult for me to handle what would be a normal stressful situation for a normal person is like extremely stressful for me. So I do have like lingering anxiety, a lot of trauma over the whole experience, and just had elevated levels of inflammation for a while. The nerve pain that I was feeling in my hands and feet actually started after I got the IUD out. I think that was my brain sort of like detoxing. I haven't experienced it in the last couple months, so I think it's gone now, which I'm happy about because it was kind of uncomfortable. But that was the last symptom that was kind of like lingering and weirding me out. But even my anxiety, so I went through a breakup a couple months after having the IUD out. And I had just been through so much that was a life stressor. That was what would cause any normal person to be very stressed out, caused me to be extremely, severely stressed out and to have severe anxiety to the point where I developed chronic fatigue, and chronic fatigue lasted for a few months. To the point where I left my job over it. And this was after having the IUD out. So definitely I had continued anxiety and elevated inflammation in my brain, like beyond the day that I got the IUD out for several months. But I've gotten better and better. And the biggest thing that's helped with my lingering anxiety that I had was CBD oil. So I was very skeptical. I just wanted to throw this in the video for a minute. My friend Gina online, she had seen me post some things about having bad anxiety and being super stressed and difficulty handling the breakup and the move and everything. I was just severely stressed out to the point where I was like waking up in the morning like sick, like hot, like sweaty and shaky. And she sent me a bottle complimentary of CBD oil. And I started taking that, and within a week, I don't know, like 7, 8, or 9 days of being on it, my anxiety basically was gone. I mean, I had a really positive experience with CBD oil. I'm not trying to sell it or anything, but Google it, try it. There's a lot of retail shops that sell it now. Make sure you get a really pure bottle of it that's just CBD and a carrier oil and no other chemicals or fillers. But yeah, that was a miracle. And that pretty much, taking the CBD pretty much knocked out the last of the issues that I was having. I had that lingering anxiety and chronic fatigue and just stress from everything that I went through, and it just knocked it right out. So I'm feeling a lot better now. I'm feeling like 99%. I mean, some days like I feel 100% back to normal now. And it is now, it's February 2019. So so I got sick in 2017. That kind of pushed through the middle of 2018. The second half of 2018, I was still like fatigued and stressed out. But finally my body and my brain feel like back to normal now here at the beginning of 2019. So, I mean, this copper IUD basically stole a year of my life. Yeah. So I now warn every woman that I meet, don't use a copper IUD. Don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, never again. Never again am I doing any kind of birth control. I just don't believe in it. It's not worth it. It's not worth dying over. I was in a Facebook group the other day. Some mom shared that her daughter had killed herself, and later on she put the pieces together that the daughter had like, she had a copper IUD and she was having all this anxiety and these really weird symptoms and like this itching. and then she ended up killing herself, and it's just so sad. And I put out, I have a survey that I'm sending out, and I'll put a link below the video here on YouTube where you can take it. I'm trying to get as many women as possible who have been sick from the IUD to sign it, to fill it out. It's just it's like a 10-question survey. Asks you when you got it put in, when you had it taken out, what kind of symptoms you had, did they improve after you got it taken out, and additional comments. Anyway, I've gotten about 120 responses on my survey so far. And just reading people's comments is heartbreaking. There are so many women that have been suicidal or gotten just extremely sick, been on disability, medical bills out the kazoo. I had thousands in medical bills. I calculated it, and I paid $5,500 out of pocket for all my doctor visits that I went to, because I went to like 7 different doctors and specialists or whatever. So, I mean, it's life ruining. I know there's women that use them and don't have any problems, but I know it was the IUD. Honestly, when I look back, there were things that were happening prior to September 27th. That summer, actually, I was starting to get really weird fatigue. Like I'd go to work, and around 8 at night, I'd be ready to go to bed, which was not usual for me. But like my head would start hurting. If I didn't go to bed, my head would hurt. So I was going to bed at like 8, 9 o'clock at night. And then I had a couple anxiety attacks that were weird, and I was having like heat sensitivity too. And heat was triggering anxiety attacks. And that was the summer before I got really sick. But I didn't really put the pieces together until afterwards. But I definitely feel like what was happening was that inflammation was building up in my system and culminated in just my body totally freaking out by the end of 2017. So that's my story. I hope it's helpful to you. I hope that if you're experiencing any of those symptoms, that you talk to your doctor. If you have an IUD in, you might want to take it out. You can always get it put back in. But if you're that sick, that you're spending all this money on medical bills and you're not figuring out what's wrong, the doctors are not going to suggest it to you. The doctors are not going to say, hey, why don't you try this or try that? They don't want to put any extra thought into like what you might need to do or like theorize anything. And they're only going to go by what they know or whatever they can see on a test. And what I've learned from this whole experience is that you have to be your own advocate. And also, doctors only know what they know. And it's like any other job that you might have, whether you're a CPA or whatever, like you know that your specific job that you do every day, but you don't necessarily understand or know things outside of that realm or outside of what you deal with every day. So doctors are not going to suggest things to you, like for liability purposes too. Like they're not gonna just suggest you try this or that. Like you're gonna have to try this or that, and you're gonna have to figure it out on your own. Certainly, like, see a doctor, right? I'm not saying like I hate doctors. I don't ever want to go to doctors again, but I will never trust a doctor again. I will always get second opinions. I will never, ever stop trying to figure out what's wrong with me. I will never stop searching for answers after this happened to me. But I'm really, really happy now that I figured it out, that it was my IUD. I got it taken out, a few months down the road. I'm back to my normal self and I'm able to live life again. But this cost me a lot of money. It cost me my job. It cost me my sanity. And it's definitely something that was really traumatic. And I really want to save as many women from it as possible. So do your research on birth control. Be very careful about getting a copper IUD. If you want to try the IUDs, that's fine. But just really, really monitor yourself. Monitor how you're feeling from week to week, and make sure if anything bizarre starts happening to you, or you develop really strange unexplained symptoms, or symptoms that your doctor can't explain, keep in mind that it might be something that, your doctor might not even know you have an IUD in. If you develop something in your head and you go to a neurologist, the neurologist is not going to ask you about your gynecological history. So you would have to put the pieces together on that. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I'm really glad I got to vent about this because it was just a horrible experience, and I want as many people about it to know as possible. And I will put the link to my IUD survey below. Just a quick note on that. I talked to a friend who's a lawyer, and the little bit of advice he gave me was, if you believe you got, like, so first of all, you also should file a complaint with the FDA. If you believe that you got sick from the copper IUD, the FDA needs to know about it, because a lot of class action lawsuits come out of multiple people filing similar complaints with the FDA, and so they get it and then they initiate it. What we would have to do is what's called an MDL, or multi-district litigation, where basically that's like multiple people are injured, but everyone to different extents. It's not really a class action lawsuit. It's not quite the same, but it's similar. I'm currently trying to get at least, 500 women to fill out my survey so that I can say, hey, there's 500 other women out there who got sick from this. They had it in, they got sick, they got it out, they got better. Like, that's pretty good evidence right there that that's what was causing your issues. If you can say that, please fill out the survey. I'm at about 120 people right now in the survey, and yeah. So I think another year or so, and I'll get to the number that I'm trying to get to. But even if that doesn't work out, if just making this video saves one person's life, then it's worth it. So I thank you for listening to me ramble, and I hope if you're sick that you find the answers you're looking for. Thanks.